Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
The story.
Well, they would leave ounces of speed for me to sell in a drawer, and I would help myself to go and sell, and I would have to put the money in the drawer. But, I started using more than what I was selling. And I got into debt, which it got me in a lot of trouble. I had two bikers come and pick me up, and they took me down to a secluded bush area and said, "You better pay us, and if you decide to run, we will find you and we'll kill you."
G'day, I'm Jimmy Colefax. Welcome to The Story. Well, Sarah Smith grew up in a turbulent home where she saw her parents raging at each other on a regular basis. Sadly, when her parents eventually split up, Sarah mistakenly thought it was her fault. And as she entered her young adult years, she says she hated herself. She went on to become involved with drugs and a biker gang, which led her to the point of having a gun held to her head. But as we'll hear, God has delivered her from her dark past and she's now living for Him. Sarah will share her incredible story today, but first, I just want to let parents know that due to the adult themes that will be discussed, today's program is not recommended for young children. Sarah Smith is joining us from her home in Perth in Western Australia, and she's chatting with Eric Scatterbo.
Sarah Smith, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Eric.
Glad to have you with us, and I am so sad to hear what you went through, and unfortunately it's so common today that children of divorced parents somehow they internalize and they blame themselves for the problems that their parents are having. And so that's what was going on in your young life at that time?
Yes, when you're observing and being, you're watching your parents destruct and have that turbulence between each other. Mm-hmm. It's difficult to process that in a young mind. Mm-hmm. You're trying to reconcile what's happening and you don't understand. And so naturally, for someone of a young age, like myself at that time, I just felt, what have I done wrong? How can I make it better? This must be my fault. These are the processes because you're trying to understand, you're trying to make sense of what you're experiencing and what you're seeing. So I think it's and that it's just the world. It's a small world. Your family, you're seeing, and that's basically everything to you. And so when that's falling apart, you're thinking you're wanting to make it better, you're wanting to make it right, but you don't know how. So you feel like that it's your fault. Yeah,
and you're taking it on to yourself at such a young age where you should just be playing with dolls and jumping on a trampoline and all that and not thinking about, the problems that your parents are having. But unfortunately, with divorce being so high in society today, you're not alone. Many children have gone through that turbulence, and unfortunately also many children somehow in their young innocent minds mistakenly think that they're to blame for it.
So true. It's rife now throughout this generation and many others. So it's very sad.
But the Lord can turn around every situation, and we're going to hear how the Lord has helped you and turn your whole life around. Where did it all begin?
Well, I was born in Liverpool, England, and I moved to New Zealand when I was 2 and my brother was 7. We moved there because my parents wanted to give us a better life. It was quite, as my mum puts it, there was a lot of, gangs over in England and Liverpool, and it was quite, just rough over there, like the Bronx of England, really. So they chose to move to New Zealand for a better life for us.
I'm just starting to see the irony. They wanted to get you away from the gangs, but yet eventually you get involved in a biker gang.
Yeah, it's ironic. It really is. Yeah, so we moved to New Zealand and, I have an older brother. He's 5 years older than me. And, it was good. We lived in a small community in New Zealand where my dad worked at the power station and it was called Merry Merry Village. So, it was just a small community and everything. And it was okay, there was nothing going on there. It was obviously quite difficult for my family to adjust to such a big change. And, obviously the transition from country to country with no family, close family for them, although they also had quite a dysfunctional upbringing themselves. So yeah, going from there, I think they just wanted to get us away from all of that drama. And yeah, but I think the isolation and, obviously trying to fit in and make new friends, and for them to start a new life deemed more challenging than what they were expecting.
And was faith a part of your life growing up?
Definitely not. We were never exposed to God or Christianity. In fact, Jesus was a swear word in our home.
Oh.
Yeah, there was no direct, I was never exposed to Christianity or God at all. So until we moved to a place called Papakura, and I was about 7 when we moved in there. My parents bought a home there, and we lived on a quite a friendly family street. And my brother and I used to ride our bikes and that up and down the street. And I was seeing this young girl, Natalia Muir, her name was.
Wow, you remember her name all these years later?
Yeah, I still think of her actually now. Yeah, wow. I do. I wonder where she is now. I've tried to look her up, but I haven't managed to find her yet. But maybe one day I'll be able to find her. And she was jumping on a trampoline, which was outside down the driveway, and I seen her, and I was bold and courageous and asked her, can I come and join her and jump on the trampoline with her? And she was gracious and said yes, sure. And so we become really good friends. And I realized that she was a homeschooled Christian. She had her mum and her sister there, and her sister was also homeschooled. And so I became a regular visitor at their home and was exposed to Christianity. And, we'd sing songs about Jesus. And I love the tambourine. I would be playing on the tambourine. I didn't understand it then, but looking back, I think, wow, that was a major time that God was sowing into my heart, the truth and who Jesus is, even though I didn't get it at the time. And at the same time as that happening, and the home, that was where the hardest time in our family was happening.
Yeah, I'm thinking, correct me if I'm wrong, but there might have been quite a contrast between the two families. So you have this turbulence and fighting and arguing in your own home. Yes. And then you have a homeschooled Christian girl jumping on a trampoline, probably not having a care in the world. I don't know. Was that kind of the impression you had?
It was like black and white. And I was so drawn to keep going there, I think, because it was almost like a refuge for me. I just found peace there, and I could live in the moment rather than in fear. I was just so fearful all the time at home.
Quite a contrast, but the Lord used that family to plant a seed in your heart at that young age?
Sure did. I'm really thankful for that. So then there was a time, I think I started going home and I was mentioning Jesus. And I think that caused a bit of concern for my parents, and my mum stopped me from going there. But at the same, it's a little bit hazy on what actually occurred there. It just seemed like I was stopped from going there. But at the same time, my parents were going through a major challenge in their marriage, and there was a lot of how can I put it?
A turbulent home, I guess, would be the.
It was a turbulent home. It really was, and. It was a tough time. My dad actually picked me up from school around that time to prepare me and tell me that, obviously mum and him were having a hard time and that they were planning on separating. So he prepared me. But then when it actually came to that point, my mum left with us 2 kids in the middle of the night without us saying bye to dad. He wasn't at home at the time. And we moved out. We went to my mum's office and stayed there the night. And not long after that, we moved into another home, and my mum had a new relationship.
Now, in your young life at that time, I mean, that had to just kind of turn your world upside down. How were you feeling at that point?
I was feeling very alone and very confused, and I just wanted my dad. I didn't understand why.
That's understandable.
Yeah, I just wanted it all back together and all better again. And in my young mind, I just wanted to fix it, you know? Yeah, just so confused and trying to reconcile what was happening. I just became insulated and quite I guess I lost a lot of confidence and self-esteem, and because of the blame and the processing in my mind that it was my fault, I began to hate myself and become angry.
So inside you're thinking, oh, could I have done something better? Was it my fault? Could I have done more? I mean, and the thing is, as adults, we're looking back at this, we know, no, you're just a child. You're just supposed to be, playing and doing your homework at school. You're not supposed to be trying to help marriages be fixed and everything. But that's what was going through your mind at that time, which turned into kind of a self-loathing, would you say?
Absolutely. And I feel like my mum, she needed somebody at that time too. She was going through such a hard time. And unfortunately, she, lent on me a lot, and which was also very difficult because I wanted to help her, but I was unable to. I didn't have the tools and I wasn't equipped. I was just a young child. And I would have liked to have just been able to be playful and enjoy times of just being a child, but there was just so much going on. It consumed every part of me. The only time that I felt that I had any sort of freedom to be me was when I went to school, or there was these times where I'd go for walks and I'd, just do pretend play in these walks and sort of create a peaceful world in those moments. But they would only be for moments, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I believe that God actually met me in those moments. He brought that peace. Although I didn't know that was God at the time, looking back, I believe that it was him.
You're listening to The Story. Today, Eric Scatterbo is chatting with Sarah Smith, who's joining us from her home in Perth and sharing her life journey with us. And as we've been hearing, Sarah grew up in a turbulent home and mistakenly blamed herself for her parents' divorce. We'll hear more of Sarah's story when we return.
If this program has highlighted something you'd like prayer for, we'd love to pray for you. Call 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. It's a free call. Or text 0401 132 888.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Colefax, and this is The Story. Today, Eric Scatterbo is chatting with Sarah Smith, who grew up in a turbulent home and mistakenly blamed herself for her parents' divorce. Sadly, this led her to loathe herself, and her life was on a downward spiral. And as we heard before the break, she went on to live with her mother.
And meanwhile, deep in your heart, you're wanting your dad.
I was wanting my dad.
Every little girl wants daddy, right?
Yes. And you want him to be proud of you. You want him to, love you and tell him how much, he thinks you're amazing and you're his princess. But I didn't get that.
And that led you to have self-confidence issues and self-loathing. And, well, actually, at one point you said you started to hate yourself.
I did. I started to hate myself, and I started to be drawn to people that also, I guess, were hurting and had struggles at school. And, we, would be the ones that meet on the oval and kind of be the outcasts and, would be hiding cigarettes and smoking and things like that, hiding from teachers, not wanting to be caught and things like that. I lost myself. I didn't know who I was anymore, and I was finding people that I could, I guess, have things in common with and connect with. And unfortunately, they were also broken people.
Yeah, so the troubled kids are banding together, I guess you could say.
Absolutely.
But then eventually you did move back with your father.
I did. I think my mum's sort of seen that was necessary, and she wanted to again make a new life for herself. And I didn't know this at the time, but she had planned to move to Australia and to start afresh, and gave me the opportunity to go and live with my dad. And he took me in, and unfortunately, because I was already broken by them, I had a broken heart. It was, it was very difficult for me to, it was a bit too much too late. Too little, too late, sorry. And, even though I got the heart's desire to move back with my dad, it wasn't what I was dreaming it would be, that he would be involved in my life and want to encourage me and support me and things like that. It was more he was living his life and I was doing my thing as a young person. And so he played a lot of sports, so he was away on weekends, and that gave me opportunity to go to friends down the road and smoke marijuana and drink while he was away. And I was just going down a bit of a spiral, but he wasn't as aware, I don't think, as much as I was, as much as I was actually doing. I don't know how much he was aware of. But one day he came home and he must have hidden his car. He must have gotten wind of I was doing something, and he actually was in the house waiting for me, and I walked in and turned the light on and he was sitting there, which absolutely shocked me, and with the most disapproved look on his face, and to ask where I'd been. And I was obviously stoned and drunk, and told him I'd been at a friend's house. And he said, well, you're moving back with your mother. I'm sending you to Australia.
So here you thought in your mind, if I was only back with my father, everything would be right in my world. Obviously, that didn't turn out that way. Now you're suddenly sent back to your mother, but she's no longer in New Zealand. She's in Australia. So this is another big upheaval in your life at this point.
Yeah, sure was. And I didn't want to go. I just felt like he was rejecting me and didn't want anything to do with me the way that
and this isn't going to help a young person's self-esteem if you're feeling rejected by your father.
Not at all. All I wanted was to be accepted and approved by him. And unfortunately, but, due to my choices as well, but I think it was because of the brokenness in my heart. I just couldn't get it right. I just kept making bad decisions, and I got myself in such a deep pit. I needed his help to get out, but he didn't realize what he needed to do to help me to get out, and instead he gave up on me. And in that moment, it just sort of cemented and affirmed what I already felt about myself, which was that I wasn't acceptable or I wasn't lovable, and that my dad didn't love me. Yeah, so I landed in Australia full of hate and hurt and very broken. Moved in with my mum, but unfortunately, because of the damage that was already done, I just started looking for where I could connect with the wrong people again. And, mum put me into a school and I just did not go. And I don't know how. I think it was about 2 months before they actually realised that the new person wasn't there. And so I ended up leaving school, and it was about, 15 years old. But during that time, so I arrived when I was 14, I was on and off going to school and not going to school, meeting people, and, met people that could score marijuana from dealers. And during this time, it was obviously again turbulent with mum and I, because I was just a mess, and I guess she was expecting me to be okay and it all to be fine again, and we could just move on with our lives. But unfortunately, because of all the hurt already in my heart, I was just full of hate still. And to me, to be able to help myself, unfortunately, I was involved in marijuana and taking drugs and that sort of thing. Eventually, my mum had enough and I had enough, and she told me to leave. I was 15. The only place that I knew to go was a drug dealer's house. And
that's not sounding very good right there.
No, it was the only place. I didn't know anyone very well, and the only ones that I knew of that would be able to take me in or help me were older people. And this guy was a drug dealer. He was in his late 30s, and I knocked on the door and said, I've got nowhere to go. Can you help me? And it was basically going into the lion's den right there and then.
Yeah, and he was a biker as well?
He was a biker. Now, I didn't know it right then and there until a bit later on, where he took me up to a place called Mosman, which is a bit of a drive up from Cairns. And, and so there I met all his friends, and they were bikers.
Oh, okay. So not a Sunday school picnic type atmosphere. These are tough bikers and involved in drugs?
Tough bikers, very much so. But I guess because I was classed as one of them now. They took me in. I felt like I belonged at the time. We partied hard. That's where I was given speed, amphetamines, and loved it straight away because it just took away any kind of pain. I was able to party. I could drink, but still be sort of able to function because the speed just helps you to stay awake and function. At the time until, it took hold of me. I became very addicted, which means that I needed to sell drugs or sell myself to be able to support my habit.
So kind of a downward spiral. And, it goes back to you're wanting these healthy needs to be met, to be approved and loved by your parents and belong. And unfortunately, some of that's being met by being a part of this biker gang. And then you want the pain to go away, and the pain is going away, but by taking drugs. So it's having healthy needs met, but in a very, very unhealthy way, would you say?
Absolutely, a counterfeit.
Yeah.
And so I think every human being has an innate desire to belong, to be loved and accepted.
Yeah.
And you're going to find that wherever you go. If you can't find it in a healthy environment and healthy relationships, you'll find it in unhealthy environment and in unhealthy relationships.
And then as you were starting to share, your life was gradually getting into that trap and spiraling downward and downward.
Yes, it was deceptive, and you think they're your friends, but actually you're being used and abused. You're selling drugs for them, but you're also getting your need met to use because it was quite an expensive habit, and unfortunately I got into debt.
Now, how did that come about?
Well, they would leave ounces of speed for me to sell in a drawer, and I would help myself to go and sell, and I would have to put the money in the drawer. But, I started using more than what I was selling, and I would give credit to people. That means I would give them the drugs and expect them to pay me later, and they would promise that they'll pay later. And I ended up making that mistake of giving the drugs away, basically, because no one ever paid. And through that, I got into debt. Got into a $2,000 debt, which, it got me in a lot of trouble. I had two bikers come and pick me up, and they took me down to a secluded bush area, and, they had a gun on each side of my head and said, you better pay us, and if you decide to run, we will find you and we'll kill you.
Wow.
I don't know how I talked my way out of that in that moment, but I did. I'll pay you. I promise I'll pay you. I'll get the money. I'll find a way, all those promises, and they let me go. I went to somebody I knew that, basically I met along the path and sort of said, you need to get out. One of these people that come along your path and sort of try and encourage you, what you're doing is wrong, get out of it. And I went to him and I said, I'm in a lot of trouble. I'm in this much debt and they're going to kill me if I don't pay. And he paid it.
Wow.
And then sent me over to Perth to get me out. But, one of the things that doing that is still the fear, because the time that I was involved with the bikers, they told me that they owned me. I was their territory. I would never break free. I'll always belong to them. That was always in the back of my mind, and I was always fearful of that with actually being sent away.
Yeah, so to add to all of the troubles you were having as far as a low self-image, not valuing yourself very much, and then now
that kind
fear
of became
and all that.
Yeah, that all became quite suppressed. All it was now was I need to survive.
Yeah, just basic survival.
Basic survival. All that other stuff was obviously buried deep.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have time to look at that or deal with that. I was in survival mode. And then I arrived in Perth and it started again, because the addiction doesn't stop just because I've geographically moved.
Right.
The addiction, I take me wherever I go.
Yeah. Wherever you go, that's where you are.
Exactly. And I was still very heavily addicted. And within weeks, I was looking desperately for drugs.
Well, we're going to have to stop it right there as we've run out of time for today's program. And as we're hearing, Sarah Smith is at her lowest point and in the strong grip of a drug addiction. But next time, we'll hear how in the midst of her desperation, she calls out to God, who lets her know there is a path out of her darkness. We'll hear how Sarah's life completely turns around next time. Well, how about you? Can you relate to aspects of Sarah's life and her desperation? Why not call out to God today? The Lord says in the Bible, when you seek me, you will find me when you seek me with all of your heart. Also, Jesus says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. If you'd like to pray with someone about this, our prayer line is 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. We would love to pray with you. On that number again, 1-800-772-936. Well, we invite you to join us again next time when we'll hear more of Sarah's story and how the Lord sets her free from the bondage of drug addiction. That's all coming up next time. Until then, I'm Jimmy Colefax, encouraging you to share your story with someone today.
Next time on The Story.
I was out one night in the middle of the night in the park, and I was just scared and desperate, and I cried out and I was like, is this what I was made for? You know, I was screaming at the top of my lungs and I was just so desperate. In that moment, I just felt a deep sense in my heart of love all of a sudden. And just an inner voice saying, no, I did not create you for that, and I'm going to show you a way out.
Sarah Smith joins us once again to share more of her story and how the Lord set her free from drug addiction and dysfunctional relationships. That's Sarah Smith sharing more of her journey to freedom next time.
The Story. Just another way Vision is helping you look to God daily.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.